Hey guys, I thought it'd be fun to list my top 10 favorite guitar players. And while there are plenty of other guitar players that I think are great, I reduced the list down to 10 with the mindset of being that these guitar players have had the most influence on me and I've listened to the most. And my influences have changed a lot over the years. If I were to list my favorite top 10 guitar players, say like 20 years ago, it would be different than it is today. I've evolved as a guitar player and as a musician. So my influences and who I check out and who I listen to has changed. But I do have a couple guitar players that influenced me early on that are in the list. And there was actually a long time where I didn't listen to guitar players because I didn't want to be influenced by them. I was trying to find my own voice and I still wanted to listen to music, so I really listened to a lot of people on piano and trumpet and saxophone, and especially in the jazz world, I listened to a lot of the greats. And that was actually put on me by Mike Stern, who suggested I should do that. But anyways, so the first one up is Joe Satriani, and each one of these guitar players, I'm just gonna say which one is my favorite record by them. I have others by each one that I like, but I thought I'd just pick one record. And so Surfing with the Alien by Satriani is my choice. And he influenced a lot of guitar players. I mean, he taught a lot of guitar players like Steve Vai and Kirk Hammett and many others. And he has great tunes. He's got a lot of different influences from blues, jazz, funk. Obviously, he's primarily a rock guitar player. And, most of his stuff is instrumental, and he really kind of was one of the pioneers of instrumental rock. And so he had a huge influence on me early on. My second guitar is actually a Satriani model, and it's the guitar I played for about 7 years from the age of 15 to 22. And so, yeah, he had a big influence on me. He's got a lot of great chops and tunes, and he studied jazz with Lenny Tristano. And anyways, yeah, so that's my first pick. Next up is Stevie Ray Vaughan and his record Texas Flood. I've listened to this a lot, and not only when I was a teenager, but also currently I still listen to this. And the first word that comes to mind when I think of Stevie Ray Vaughan is power. To me, he's just got a lot of power in his playing and great tone. And one of the things about him that I really like is you can really hear his influences. I mean, he wears his influences on his sleeve, like Hendrix and Albert King, but he always sounds like himself. And that's something really interesting about him, to me anyways, is how he's able to do that. And I think a lot of it has to come down to the fact that he has such a powerful personality in his playing that it just sort of overrides those influences, so you can really hear his voice. And yeah, so Stevie Ray Vaughan, one of the greats. All right, and then Mike Stern. So Mike Stern, like I mentioned in the earlier part of this video, I studied with him, and he, to me, he's just a great example of a fusion guitar player. He's studied a lot of bebop, but he comes from rock, and so you can really hear his rock influences, his blues influences, funk, and his tunes have a lot of kind of pop influences as far as the melodies and some of the chord progressions. And he was in Miles Davis's group, and he's got great chops, great tunes, and he's got definitely an identifiable sound. Very cool guy, by the way, hanging with him and listening to him play and studying with him. Just a great guy. And if you guys haven't seen it, I actually watched it recently. He's got a rig rundown for Premier Guitar that's pretty hilarious to watch. So I recommend checking that out. And yeah, Mike's still on it today. I mean, he's still touring, writing tunes, releasing records, and just living the life of a touring musician. All right, and then Pat Metheny, one of the most dedicated musicians on the planet. I mean, this guy's just been on the road recording and writing tunes and practicing for many, many years. And Pat's just, he's just a powerhouse, and he's kind of iconic. And this record, Bright Size Life, kind of hit me fairly recently. It was about like 6 months ago. I mean, I had this record sitting around and I had listened to it a bunch, but it wasn't until about 6 months ago when it really hit me how great it is and innovative for the time. And, Pat's just got great tunes. He's a true artist. He's always evolving and trying out different instruments and different sounds. And yeah, he's just got a deep understanding of music, the history of it, and created a very identifiable sound. And, he he taught at Berklee College of Music when he was a teenager. And he taught Mike Stern and Wayne Krantz and a few other people. And yeah, so this record, Bright Size Life, great record. Bill Frisell is the next one. And Bill, to me, when I think of Bill, I think a very deep and profound player. He's got a nice balance, I think, of simple and complex. Like even when he plays just like a C chord, it sounds like him. And he's been in a lot of different situations musically, and he's very open-minded musically, and no matter what situation he's in, he always sounds like himself, which is pretty powerful to, I mean, he'll play a Telecaster, and then he'll play a Strat, and then he'll play, such a wide variety of guitars, and he always sounds like himself. And, he's another one that's just got a deep understanding of music. Like myself, he studied with this teacher named Mick Goodrick, and Mick Goodrick's taught Mike Stern and Pat Metheny and many other of the great modern jazz guys. And yeah, so Bill Frisell. And this record, by the way, I don't even know if this is the right cover. I just kind of flipped the sleeve around. But this is the record he did with Dave Holland on bass and Elvin Jones on drums. And this record is, to me, it's just a very deep expression. It's great, the way they play together and the sounds they get. And anyways, I highly recommend this record if you haven't checked it out already. Blow by Blow, Jeff Beck. And yeah, Jeff Beck, he's maybe like 10 years ago, I got hip to his playing more so because I had read Joe Satriani really liked Jeff Beck, and when I first listened to Jeff Beck, I didn't really get it as a teenager. It just seemed kind of bland and simple and not interesting because I was really into, these virtuosic guitar players like Satriani and Steve Vai and Steve Morse. And when I heard blues guys like Jeff Beck, with the exception of Stevie Ray Vaughan, he hit me right away. But when I heard someone like Jeff Beck, it just didn't really do much for me. And then about 10 years ago, I was listening to this record and a couple others by him, and I finally heard it and, was just amazed by how great he is. And yeah, his use of space, he's got a very individual sound. I kind of think of him as a fusion player. He's got some, he's obviously primarily a rock guy with blues influences, and even on this record there's some funk grooves happening and some different sounds, and he's got a great tone and just a really profound voice. When he plays a note or two, you can immediately hear that it's him. And yeah, so Jeff Beck is one of my favorites. And then Albert King is fairly recent for me, maybe like 8 or 9 years ago I really started listening to him. And Hard Bargain, this record, Hard Bargain, it's kind of a collection of recording dates for the record label Stax that he did from the late 60s to the early 70s, I believe. And yeah, you know, he's just very raw, obviously very, very soulful. I love his use of space, very identifiable sound. He's kind of a fusion of, you know, he's born in Mississippi, so he's kind of got a fusion of Mississippi Delta blues and Memphis blues. And he used a flying V guitar primarily, and he turned it upside down. He used open tunings, light gauge strings, big bends, and he had the high E string on the bottom, and then the big string, you know, on the top. So that allowed him to bend strings really far, and so just, you know, a really unique, I would say, innovative blues musician that influenced a lot of people. I mean, he influenced so many guitar players, including myself. And then Allan Holdsworth, this record, All Night Wrong. Allan is a very recent influence of mine, or someone that I really like listening to. And this record I got, you know, it was only about 6 months ago I got this record, and it just floored me. I mean, it's just incredible. And, you know, I had listened to Allan as a teenager, but it kind of went over my head a little bit, didn't really grab me. He's so sophisticated, and melodically, harmonically, he's got a very individual way of putting music together. And to me, he's almost got this combination of modern classical music as far as the harmonic stuff that he uses, harmonic information, and modern jazz. You know, he really loved John Coltrane. And he's just got these incredible, as anybody knows that's listened to him, incredible melodic ideas when he's soloing, and a very deep understanding of scale chord relationship, and he really figured out his own way of doing it. And that's kind of one of his pieces of advice for musicians, is to hold on to your own individual way of playing. And he makes the point that it can be so easy to be influenced by other people and then you know, fall into the rut of what other people tell you you should do or how you should sound. And anyways, Allan just very much has his own way of playing, and I think he's just absolutely incredible. So yeah, Allan Holdsworth. All right, last two. Wes Montgomery. This record hit me about 2 years ago. You know, when I went to Berklee College of Music, I listened to this record and learned a couple of the solos from it, and but it wasn't until about 2 years ago that, like I said, I've just evolved as a player and as a musician. So it just, for whatever reason, because of, you know, my evolution, the way Wes plays just hit me hard. And the thing about Wes is, you know, he used his thumb like anybody knows, and he did octaves a lot, and just a very innovative player. But the thing to me that really sticks out about Wes is obviously a very identifiable sound, but very soulful, very intellectual. When you analyze his solos, I mean, everything lines up perfectly with the harmony. It all makes sense, and he's using the altered scale and symmetrical dominant scale and Dorian and Phrygian. You know, he's using all the different modes and stuff, and but it never sounds intellectual. You know, that's one of the things about Wes, is it always sounds soulful, and his feel is just incredible. And the way he phrases, his phrasing is just beautiful. I mean, everything is just so clear and so articulate. Yeah, you know, Wes, man, one of the greats. So incredible jazz guitars. You know, this record I've listened to over and over and over again, and I love it. All right, and then I almost picked Wes Montgomery as my number one, but I'm gonna pick Wayne Krantz. Anybody that knows me knows how much I value my relationship with Wayne. You know, Wayne, he just has had such a big influence on my life as a musician and as a person. And, you know, very, very unique. He actually went through many years of not listening to music to help find his own way of playing and his own sound and stuff. And he really developed his own approach to practicing and playing and composing. One of the things about Wayne is his time. He's got his ability to play in the center of the time is just incredible. And, you know, very innovative. He's very much an artist. He's always evolving and always exploring new ways of playing and thinking about music, and always going into new zones. And, you know, his rhythmic imagination is just off the charts. I mean, he's one of the most rhythmically advanced guitar players there is. The way he is able to just naturally hear, you know, rhythmic superimpositions. Like he'll play ideas that are like a 5/8 rhythm in 4/4. So he's always, with his bands, always improvising in 4/4. But he'll take other time signatures like 7/8, 5/8, 3/8, and superimpose those rhythmic ideas over 4/4. But it's always natural for him. That's just how he hears. And I got into that for a while, is really trying to develop that rhythmic language. And you can hear a lot of that influence on my record called Rehearsals, where I'm superimposing different time signatures. And, you know, I was starting to kind of hear that, but I realized it wasn't really my voice so much. It's still in my playing, but it's not as predominant as it is with his playing. Just because, you know, it's so natural for him. So, yeah, you know, just for him to be my musical hero and friend, and the best teacher I've ever had, really, for any subject. And this record, Your Basic Live 06, I mentioned this in my last video about his new book, which I, again, recommend checking out. This is just live tracks from this bar that he's played at for decades, called the 55 Bar. Just incredible stuff on this record. And, you know, when I studied with him in New York City, I had him sign it. And, yeah, one of the things that's, you know, there's kind of like a common thread, or common threads throughout all these guitar players that makes me like them, or at least these are some of the elements that make me like them. One of the things is they're all innovative players. They all have their very unique approach to music and playing, and their own unique sounds. And all these guys are all leaders too. I was realizing that all these guys are leaders of their bands, and their records are, you know, their name is the title of the or part of the title of the record. They're not in a band, you know. They put their own bands together, and they're the leaders. And yeah, like I said, innovative. And probably the most important aspect is the fact that they're all improvisers. All of their solos are improvised. And with Wayne, I mean, a huge part of at least the live stuff that he does is very much improvised. And to me, I love that. I love improvisation. Composition is obviously important too, but in terms of just opening things up, especially in a live setting, to where the band can improvise together, that's such a great opportunity to make that happen. And you know, some improvise more than others. I would say Wayne, out of all of them, is more of a kind of a true improviser, in that he doesn't really use patterns or licks to create ideas in the moment. But all these guys improvise in their own way to varying degrees. And even with someone like Joe Satriani, as you know, he presents his band as like basically an instrumental rock band. And in the solos, he'll sometimes play ideas that are on the record, as far as when he's soloing, but he'll trail off and create new ideas in the moment. And yeah, so that's just a big aspect of what makes me like these guys, is they're all great improvisers. All right, guys, I hope you found this somewhat perhaps useful, and yeah, maybe some of you haven't heard of some of these guitar players or some of these records I listed. And, you know, there's plenty of great guitar players out there. I'm sure some of you have your favorites that you wish I listed, but these are the ones that sort of stick out to me as players that have really influenced me in a very kind of indirect way. Like, for instance, Wayne Krantz, I've never learned any of his tunes. I've never transcribed his stuff. I don't know any of his licks. I don't know any of the chords he uses, or I mean, I have a vague sense of that stuff, but I've never copped any of his stuff. And partly because, you know, I'm very influenced by people if I do play like them or learn stuff by them. And so I think that's a great thing that you can do as somebody that's trying to find your own sound and your own way of playing, is you can be influenced by these people, whoever you like, without learning specific ideas by them. And you can just sort of get a general sense of how they play and be influenced by that to create your own way of playing. And, you know, like Allan Holdsworth, I've never learned anything from him. I mean, I've looked at some of his transcriptions and stuff and got a sense from those transcriptions about how he plays and what he's doing, and I've learned, you know, some of his approach about scale chord relationships and all that. But that's it, you know, and I really just get influenced by just his own unique way of playing. And so, yeah, so that's just maybe something to keep in mind, that I think it's valuable to be influenced by people in a way that's not so derivative, but more kind of vague. Like, for instance, like you could be influenced by Albert King in terms of just like the rawness of it or the soulfulness of it, and apply that to the way you play jazz or something, you know, or classical music or whatever else that you're doing. All right, guys, I'll talk to you in a video to come in the near future. All right, thanks for watching.